Now we're recording.
Yeah.
We've been going over the buyer-broker agreement and the listing agreement quite a bit, and we went over the purchase agreement. So today, I thought we would go over some of the ancillary documents, some of the addendums and amendments. Unless you, I want this to be productive for you, so unless you want to go over something in particular. Carol?
Well, it relates to that email that I sent you. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have a scenario.
Here's my.
All right, let's start with a scenario. I love when we have scenarios.
So we have a listing, me and Mark and I,
Okay.
and then on the seller multiple counter offer, we put seller to find a replacement property in 10 days.
Okay.
All right, so then he rented instead of buying another house. So we did a contingency removal. I asked around, and that was the best way to go, so we did that. And then, and Mark's okay with that. But now I'm told that I need an amendment to remove that language from the contract. And I'm okay with doing that, but we're right at the end, we're running over. The buyer's older, she's having problems with stuff. I don't know if it's necessary or not.
Why would it, who's telling you that you need an amendment?
Angie.
Okay. I wonder what the thought process is around that.
I don't know, I talked to her yesterday, but I can talk to her.
Okay, so, all right, so in the contract, there's a contingency for the seller to find and replace a property.
Right.
And the seller did find a replacement property.
Well, he's renting, he didn't buy anything.
Sure, that's a replacement property though, isn't it?
Right.
And then you removed, by using a contingency removal document, you removed that contingency.
Right.
You're done.
That's what I think.
You're done,
Okay.
yeah. That removed the contingency. Yeah, we don't need anything removing any language.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Just have Angie come and talk to me, because, by the way, Angie is so great. She does such a great job
She's
for us
awesome.
on compliance. And what I love is that she's not just doing her job, because it can become a very monotonous job, just looking at every document and making sure. But she actually gets involved in every transaction and thinks it through, and that's what best protects us. So it's awesome that she's thinking along those lines, because I think I understand what she's thinking.
Right.
But in this particular situation, I think we're good, because the replacement property contingency doesn't specify that somebody has to buy or rent, or it's just, I need another place to live.
Yeah.
I don't want to be homeless, right? Okay, so now that answered your email.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's one less email that I have to attend to later today, right? There we go. And you all got to learn something at the same time. Any other scenarios that you want to talk about before we dive in? Anything else?
Can you do an open house on a house that's not listed?
Can you do an open house on a house that isn't listed? Give me a scenario of what that might look like.
Okay, Mark has a house, a flip in Lancaster,
Oh,
and they're working on it. It's not quite done, maybe almost done. It's just, I don't think it's
Yes.
listed yet.
yes. You can do that because it's Mark's. Right? So the owner can choose to have an open house, and you're a licensed agent, and he's licensed, and you're licensed, and yeah, sure, you can do an open house.
Okay, good.
You just have to be careful about how you advertise a house that's not yet listed on the MLS, because there is a rule that says you're not allowed to have any pocket listings, right? So you just want to make sure that you're doing that open house in a way that doesn't bring any violations from the MLS about having a pocket listing or something like that.
Can you put it on Facebook or anything and say coming soon? I've never done a coming soon on Gallup.
So the coming soon stuff is really, it used to be a thing. We used to do that all the time. And you're not allowed anymore, really, unless you put it in the MLS as a coming soon. And I don't believe that Flex, the Gavar, offers that opportunity. I know that SRAR does, and they have a category for coming soon. And then that allows you the opportunity to advertise it on Facebook and other things. So I think it's more or less signs, and it's almost like you're treating it like it's a for sale by owner type situation.
So you think it's okay to put it on Facebook and Instagram?
I think,
Can I call Gavbar and see what they say?
it's tricky because Mark owns it. So it makes me feel like that would be perfectly fine because it's his house. So I think if he were to do it, but I don't know if you would do it for him, if that crosses any lines. So yeah, you may want to,
Call Gavbar and see?
you may want to call Gavard just to make sure that we don't get in trouble for something.
Okay.
You may want to do that. Anything else? Any other scenarios or snafus? Anything you want to talk about in particular? Any particular document that you want to go over, or should I just do my thing?
Do your thing.
Can you go over the land, what is it? Listing agreement?
The land listing agreement?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Carol. Wow, that's like a whole other world, isn't it? Land listing agreement, right? All right, what's this first page?
Disclosure.
Boy, I do this every time. I feel like you guys would just like spit it out. Because I guess we have a
It's an
different.
agency
What?
agreement.
It's an agency agreement? Is it an agency agreement?
Confirming agency relationship.
Disclosure.
Is it confirming agency relationships?
It's a,
No.
it's a,
No,
No, I mean, wait a
it's
minute.
a disclosure.
Yeah, yeah.
it's a disclosure.
It says that an agency, relationship
I belong there.
exists, or can exist, or does exist in the state of California.
Right, it says that agency relationships do exist in the state of California. There are three types: sellers, buyers, and dual agency. And all three are legal in the state of California, but it does not confirm the agency relationship itself. Yes or yes?
Yes.
Yeah. It does not confirm the actual relationship. It's just telling the seller or the buyer that, hey, we owe you a fiduciary obligation in the state of California. All right, and then you have the vacant land advisory, which is advising the seller of all the things. Basically, they have to disclose anything that they know about. All right, the date prepared. The date prepared is the day you prepared it. But this is not the date of the agreement. This is not the date of the agreement. This is the date in which it was prepared. I don't exactly know the significance of why the date prepared is, I don't know that. I have a guess that if it ever came down to a situation where we were in court, then maybe that date would have some kind of impact on who spoke to when, who spoke to who when, maybe, or something like that. Like if the client spoke to two different agents at two different brokerages, then maybe this could help, facilitate that argument perhaps. But that is only the day that it is prepared. The exclusive authorization for the owner. Now, what happens, because this came up earlier today, what happens if you have two owners on the property and one of them has passed away? Do both names have to go on the listing agreement?
No.
Depends on if the one who passed away, if it was in a trust or
Not if
How many signatures, or how many people on title does it take to list a property for sale?
one.
One. It doesn't take both, right? So it's a trick question, because it doesn't matter whether the person is deceased or not deceased. It only takes one to list. So you don't have, you can have one owner's name and one owner's signature on the listing agreement, and you can list the property for sale. Now, you do need how many signatures to sell the property? You need all of the owner's signatures. Now, in this particular situation, if the second owner is deceased, then that would go to determine how was the property titled. Was it joint tenancy? If it was joint tenancy, then simply a death certificate is gonna do it, title's gonna accept that, we're gonna close, right? But if it's tenants in common, or it's community property, or it's another form of taking title that is not have rights of survivorship, then that's gonna put a whole nother spin on it. Wendell,
I had a situation where.
loud and proud so everybody can hear you. You got
I'm sorry.
a wonderful
I had a
voice.
situation where the client was the survivor, okay, and the survivor was not on title. In other words, the husband bought the property, he died, but did not put her on title. In his will, he left her all of his estate.
Bummer.
I know what we did, but well, I guess I can say it.
Bummer.
Basically, we did a document that put her on title, had to go to court.
Yeah,
and everything,
right.
And that gave her a clear title.
Right. That's a form of probate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
right. And that all is just gonna depend on how much everything is worth.
Right.
In the estate, and then, all that's changed. It used to be $50,000, now I think it's up to, Tiffany, you sent me something saying it was like $180,000.
No, it said $750.
$750,000 now?
That's what I sent you, was from CAR. That's why I was
Wow.
questioning.
Yeah.
Because
I
it
know.
was like 185 or 189,000.
And it used to be 50 a long time ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one.
Yeah, so, okay, so, I mean, that would be great if that were actuality.
Yeah.
Because that means that most people avoid probate, which would be great. If that's true, but I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I
It's
just
just-
wanted to look into it.
It's a grapevine thing. Okay, so, the exclusive and irrevocable right to sell, lease, exchange, option, or other. Okay? The listing period, again, is found here, and again, it can be up to 24 months. You have the listing price, and if there is a manufactured home or it is a probate, which in this case it is not. And then again, the compensation is 3%. This is very much like a residential listing agreement, right? All the rest of this. Additional compensation if the buyer is unrepresented. Additional compensation if the buyer is unrepresented. What does this mean?
If they come to you to your listing marketing efforts and they have no buyer broker sign, then the seller says, hey, you're representing both sides, now I'm due to more compensation for my extra effort.
You were very, that was a great explanation, Brandon, and you only had one word in there that you used that isn't correct. But the rest of it was a great way to explain it. Tiffany, do you have something to say?
Yeah, the unrepresented buyer means that they're not going to sign a buyer broker agreement with anybody and they don't want to be represented.
Correct, that's the nuance. They're completely unrepresented.
Oh, they're just doing their own thing.
Yeah, because this is, by the way, the biggest confusion, because in California, we never used to have this ability. So think of it like this, think of it like the difference between a customer and a client.
Oh, yeah.
A client is somebody that we represent. A customer is someone whom we don't represent. They're simply representing themselves, and we're facilitating. We're not a fiduciary, we're a functionary. We're typing up the contract on behalf of the seller. We're providing the disclosures on behalf of the seller, but we're not advising them of anything, and all we are is a functionary. Brando.
So basically, you're just facilitating the transaction for the request. However, if they get mad later down the road, well, hey, there was never a fiduciary obligation because you opted out.
Correct. My fiduciary was to my seller,
Yeah.
not to you, because you chose not to have that.
Right, it's just a document preparer.
I'm a document preparer. Right. And so because of that, the seller says, or we're saying to the seller, because I'm gonna be a functionary, you gotta pay me for that. So you're gonna come up with whatever you believe is adequate to charge the seller for you to be a functionary. Now, if you can get 3% to be a functionary, good for you. But I doubt that that's probably gonna be a thing. So I would be considering and thinking about what your minimum cost of doing business is and then how much profit you would want to take for being the functionary and put a dollar amount to it. Perhaps. That way you have a standard way of doing business.
And if we don't put it then, at the time of the listing, can we add it in with the
Sure.
modification? Oh,
Sure, but your leverage is diminished.
for me.
Think about it, I come to the seller now, this buyer wants to write it up. I have a fiduciary to my seller, so either way I gotta write it. But now I'm probably not gonna get paid unless the seller wants to pay me. But but they're not like, who wants to do the dishes? Nobody wants to do the dishes. Right? You just have to do the dishes, right? You follow what I'm saying? Like, you guys don't know that joke? Where the wife says to the husband, I want you to want to do the dishes. And he says, I don't know what he wants to do the dishes. You just have to do the dishes. Right? So I would probably put some number, depending on the purchase price of the house, I'd probably put $5,000 or $3,500, whatever you determine. You also can do a percentage if you want. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just making a suggestion. Okay, remember, this is if the buyer is not represented.
And what form is that accompanied by? The non-representation for the buyer?
Thank you, Blanca, that's true, yes. So then you would have the buyer sign a non-representation agreement. Yeah, because you want the buyer to acknowledge that you've talked to them about it, and they are not going to be represented. So good point. Now, the idea would be to actually get a representation agreement, yes? Is that what's best for the buyer? It is. So you wanna actually coach them into doing what's best for them, which, by the way, is our job as the professional. Our job as the professional is always to coach the client into doing what is best for them.
So what disclosure does he have to sign? The AD?
So then, if we are gonna represent them, then that's when we would use the BRBC. We would break out the buyer broker agreement and have them go into contract with us at that time.
Wait, this is for representation or non-representation?
I'm talking about representation now.
Oh, yeah, regular, normal.
Yeah, because we've already talked about the
Yes,
non.
okay.
Yeah,
good,
so
sorry.
now we're gonna coach the client into letting us represent them, because it is what's best for them. Why is it what's best for them?
And one of the reasons would be is because the law changes and they may not be up on the law. Now they're
The
opening
law changes, they may not be up on the law.
They're opening themselves up to liability.
Right,
To provide them with fiduciary duties.
to provide them with a fiduciary. And so as a part of the explanation, we should be explaining that to the customer who we want to become a client. Customer, you realize you're on your own on this bad boy. Like, the seller I have a fiduciary in the seller because you're choosing not to be represented. Which means it's you against us. We don't want against. We want to make this work for both of you. We want to create a win-win. So the right thing to do, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is to have the full fiduciary and sign the buyer broker agreement. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
And then you sign the buyer broker. Now, this clause, this C2 clause, no longer applies. Because now the buyer is represented by you. Now you're representing both sides. Make sense? Clear as mud?
Yes.
You got it? Do you have it though, for sure?
We have it.
For realsies? Okay. All right, because I'm getting like weird stuff happening. Okay. All right, and then the continuation of right to compensate the broker, identify prospective buyers. So this is the safety clause that we have in our listing agreement. Remember, the listing agreement says we can put in a number of days, and then after the expiration of the listing agreement, any buyer that we showed the property to buys the property in that period of time, then the seller still owes us a compensation. That's what this is as well. Okay, so I always go with 120 days. 4 months seems to be an adequate amount of time where people are probably not going to want to wait around to hose me. You know, but that's up to you. You can put in whatever you want. I don't know this to be fact, but it makes common sense to me, and I know that we're in the state of not common sense for you. But well, I just will explain that what I think that you probably can't put more days in that blank than the contract is for. So if you have a 3-month listing agreement, it's probably not appropriate to put a 4-month continuation. Is this making sense? You got it, Blanca? You good? So, I didn't think so. So, if you have a 3-month listing agreement, that means the seller's giving me 3 months.
A listing agreement or?
A listing agreement. This is a listing agreement. Vacant land listing agreement. So if the seller is hiring me to list their property for sale for 3 months, and now the continuation period is going to be 120 days, the continuation period is longer than the amount of the original agreement.
So we need to change it?
So if that were the case, then I would think that this should be 90, right? No more than 90
Oh,
days.
yeah, I have to go with the,
Yeah.
trying to match.
Yeah, I think it, you know, I don't think it can extend past it, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
It would make sense to me that would be thrown out if it went to court. Yes, sir.
What if you don't sell in 90 days? Could you get extension on the 90 days?
Absolutely, you can get an extension, and you would use a modification of terms for that extension on a listing agreement.
Now there's two, one for the buyer and one for the seller, not before. Before it was only for
Correct.
the seller.
Yeah,
So I
because
like
now
that.
we are listing buyers.
And we can use the modification of terms to extend the representation.
We can,
Okay.
right. Yeah, that's what it's for, because now we have buyer listings now, right? We have seller listings and now we have buyer listings.
Buyers,
Essentially, we're listing buyers. So you can use a modification of terms to change that. And you don't have to worry about this clause in C3 because the modification of terms language specifies that all of the original agreements are to stay in place. Only what is on the page is what we're modifying. So the 90 days would stay in effect. Okay? An owner obligation to pay the previous broker. So in the event that the seller was already listed with another broker, and they were in this continuation period with that other broker, then this is where they would disclose that to you. Make sense? Okay. All right, anything that's intended to be included or excluded would go in here. That's pretty self-explanatory. The property will be marketed in the following MLSs. Make sure that you do put the name of the MLS and not the name of the association. This is often misunderstood. So Southern Sierras Ridgecrest, CRMLS is down below, and Flex is us here at Gavar. Because Gavar, SRAR, and Ridgecrest are all names of associations. They're not the names of the MLS. The MLS is Flex, Southern Sierra, or CRMLS.
Wait, for here, for Antelope Valley is what?
Flex.
Oh, good.
We use the Flex MLS system. So that is the MLS that we would market in, right? there's nothing wrong with putting Gavar and Ridgecrest and SR. It's not like it's the end of the world, not like it's gonna void the agreement, but it isn't accurate. And then the publication of seller's willingness to consider concessions. So this is where if checked below, the seller authorizes the broker to market, that the seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions. No amount of the possible concessions will be stated in such marketing unless the seller notifies the broker in writing of the amount. So if the seller is willing to consider concessions, what are some concessions?
Closing costs, closing credit.
Closing costs.
Recurring and non-recurring.
What else might be a concession that the buyer may ask for?
The chandeliers on the roof, on the ceiling.
Yeah, well, this is a vacant land though.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. How about buyer broker compensation?
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah, that's a concession, right? So this is where we have a fancy way of putting in the willingness for the seller to pay buyer broker compensation. Owner instructs the broker not to take or use photographs in marketing except as required by the MLS rules. I don't know why anybody would do that, and it's here just in case. Timing of the presentation of offers. This is where the owner instructs the broker will present offers at a certain time. This is relevant back in the day when, if you remember, the fish were jumping in the boat. You remember in 2021, 22, when all you had to do is wake up at night and think, I might sell that piece of land, and you had 10 offers, right? So a lot of agents were informing buyers and buyer agents that I'm presenting all offers on Friday at 5 p.m. and we have poor losers in the world, right? So they're like kicking rocks, thinking that their offer's not really being presented. So this way, there is a way for the listing agent to show the buyer's agent that it's legitimate, that they were instructed by the owner to save up all the offers and present it at one time. That's a little insurance, so to speak. All right, investigation reports. So these are anything that the seller may have purchased or had completed prior to listing the property. And sometimes we do that. What would be a good reason to have a natural hazard disclosure before we list the property?
If it's in a flood zone.
Find out that it's in a flood zone or a high fire hazard zone or earthquake zone or something like this, where now the owner of the property knows when they're going to negotiate offers what's up, right? Exceptions to the ownership or title. So this is where it would be a good place to put the second owner is deceased, death certificate on file, or something like that. And then the owner intends to include a contingency to purchase or replace a property as a part of any transaction. That's where that would. I don't really see that happening on a listing for vacant land, but it could. It could. Owner opts out of lock boxes and signs. I don't really know why you'd have a lock box on a vacant lot. You could if it was fenced with a gate. I'd have that. And then any additional terms. And then this is where you would attach the advisories and addenda. So why is it important that if we do have any advisories or addenda, or addendums, as you might consider them, what would be the reason that we would need to check these boxes to add those addenda?
So that the buyer or the sellers know exactly what they're gonna entitle when they submit the offers, like the whole things are gonna be needed.
Yeah, because otherwise, the addenda and or the advisory is not really a part of the agreement. In order for that to be a part of the agreement, you have to check the box bringing the two together. Make sense?
Okay.
Compensation of the broker, all compensation is not fixed by law, and it is negotiable. Dorothea, did I answer your question as it relates to the vacant land listing agreement?
Yes, yes, you did.
You're good?
I'm good.
Okay,
This is just a reminder for tomorrow's slots.
wonderful.
Drew,
Yes.
how about, can we go back to page 1 to, C1?
Sure.
Because I think you have 3% as commission. Does she know that it's customary for land, 5%?
Oh, good point.
I thought it was 10.
Good job, Cecilia.
Cecilia, you
And
get,
also, if we can add, I guess, with the 199 to the seller to pay, we can still do that in there, right?
Yes.
you can, Cecilia, thank you.
Okay, good.
You get the gold star of the day.
Yay!
So, yes, you're right, good catch.
But you don't put the 199 there, you put it on the next one. Next-
So typically, we do 5% on vacant land as a listing, right? It used to be 10% because we would share 5% with the buyer broker, but since we don't share compensation anymore,
Or
we
you can
do
a flat fee.
5% or an amount of money.
Yes.
Depending on the price point. Because vacant land can be, you can have a $7,000 lot. You
Yeah.
don't want to charge 5%
No,
on a $7,000 lot. You would just put in $1,500 or something,
Yeah,
whatever you,
15,000.
whatever your bottom line number is.
So you can't do no more than 5.
Say it again.
You can't do any more than 5.
You can do whatever you want. You can put 25%.
yes, you can.
Commission is negotiable.
Everything is negotiable.
It's negotiable. That doesn't mean you're capped. All I'm showing you is an industry wide used. Typically, this is what people. I'm trying not to get myself in trouble by saying some kind of standardized deal here, but sellers are comfortable with 5%. But this number could be 6, it could be 7, it could be 25, it could be 3, it could be 4. It is negotiable, and it is not set by law.
And you can also check the dollar box, right, and just set a flat fee.
And you could, right, so if you didn't wanna do that, then you could check this and you could say $1,500. Like, let's say it's an inexpensive piece of land, then you could just charge a flat amount.
Wait, and where does the 199 go? If you use the box?
Well, I would use this box and I would include it.
Yes, okay.
So here I would go
Yes.
$16.99.
And you add the 199.
That's what I would do,
Yes.
because it doesn't make sense to have two things, right? But if I'm not gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this instead, then I'm gonna go 5, and then here I'm gonna put 199.
Yes, correct.
Is it always 199 or is it less
And
sometimes?
it could be less if it's land.
149,
It could be 149.
99.
It could be 99.
What's the
If you're
cutoff?
doing both
Check with the
sides.
office, just to make sure. Check
Okay,
with the.
just check with the office.
Patricia.
It depends on the purchase, not the purchase price, but the list price of the property. If it's under a certain threshold.
And
we
if your
reduce it.
commission is 1,500 or less, it's 99. And if it's a Keller Williams agent and you're dual, it's 149.
Yes,
But it's the third.
because we're handling all of it, so the expense is not as high. We're collecting it twice. All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns on the vacant land listing agreement?
No, but can we throw out another subject?
Please.
Assumable loans. Have you, anybody doing assumable loans? We have a
Anybody
house
doing
for-
assumable loans?
We have a house for sale and somebody throw us a letter of intent that they're willing to take the current mortgage and they give us a price, But
But are
that's
those
assumable. So where do we
assumable, or
start?
are they trying to get your seller to carry the loan? Because I
No,
thought,
no, they want to assume the loan.
oh, okay,
No, seller will not carry it.
right, but I get a lot of those.
Oh, really? That they want the seller to carry it?
They want to do creative financing, they call it, but in the end, they're asking.
We're not so interested because
Yeah.
we're not really comfortable, not even for our sellers to share with him. Because I'm not comfortable, and the seller is special also.
Yeah.
So, trying to throw at something that we're not even comfortable with.
Yeah, so an assumable loan just means that the person received a loan that can be assumed by another buyer. And so let's say that the property is worth $450,000 and the seller owes $400 to the bank and they have a 3% interest rate. That's a pretty attractive loan for a buyer, plus whatever the seller's already paid down on that, right? So he's already paid some of the interest, because the interest is front-loaded on the mortgages, right? So it's advantageous for a buyer to come in. They do have to qualify for the loan
With who?
with the original lender, because they're assuming the loan. All they're doing is taking over the loan.
And the lender has to, the loan has to be assumable.
The loan has to be assumable to even begin, right? VA loans are all assumable, by the way, by another veteran. In some cases, they can be assumable by a non-veteran. But if that's the case, then the original veteran, their eligibility certificate stays on the hook. So most of the time, people don't do that, but it can be done. FHA loans primarily are not assumable, but there are some that are, so your seller has to check and see if they have one that is assumable. And not all conventional loans are assumable.
So is better to start with who? With the mortgage company?
Yeah, you call the mortgage company and you say, is my loan assumable? And then that is a marketing strategy that you, as a seller, you could use. It's perfectly legitimate. They have to qualify, and if they qualify, then that bank will switch the loan from the seller over to the buyer, and the buyer would write a check for the balance. So in this case, the buyer would write a check for $50,000 to close the deal, and they would get that $400,000 loan from the original institution. Wendell.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the person that assumes the loan now takes all the liability, all the issues, they take all of it.
Yes.
And the other person is released from all of that.
Released. The loan now switches into the buyer's name, and the seller is completely released and relieved of any and all obligations. And the buyer, it's no different than let's say that Blanca was the seller, and she had a loan with Chase at 3% interest for 30 years, and she was selling the house for $450, and Carol decided to buy it. So Carol comes in and says, I like your price of $450, but today, in today's world, I can only get a $400,000 loan at 7% interest unless I buy the rate down. You are more than cutting my rate in half by me assuming your loan. So I'll tell you what, I'll take your $400,000 loan at 3% interest, and I'll write a check for $50,000, which I would have had to do anyway. If I was putting 5% down, I would have had to come up with $30-something thousand anyway. So now I'm adding a little bit of money with it, and I'm taking your loan over. That's no different than Carol walking into Chase Bank without Blanca and saying, I would like to borrow $400,000. It's still Carol's loan.
This is a good coaching point too for our clients.
It's a great coaching point for our clients. The first thing we have to do is we have to contact the lender of the seller and find out if the loan is assumable and what has to be done in order for the buyer to assume it. And then you can make that as a part of your marketing efforts when you're selling the house. Tiffany.
I was just gonna say that I went that course and was calling when it was crazy, asking if loans were assumable, and most FHA people told me no. And then after talking to our mutual friend lender, every FHA loan is assumable. So he called the lender and she's like, oh, okay, and it was. She didn't know it was.
That's right, I remember this.
I thought that no conventional loans were assumable, only FHA, all FHA are
Okay.
assumable.
All right, so we have correction. I said some of them are not, but apparently all FHA loans are assumable.
Oh, okay, got it.
Even if they don't think they are, have your lender call them and find out,
Yeah.
ask the right questions.
Smart, but some not, so it's very difficult.
Carol?
At what point, dollar-wise, or maybe percentage-wise, does it not make sense to assume the loan? Because if there's a huge, you can only assume a little bit, or the loan is small, or whatever you assume. The leftover part, you get another loan for that? Does it have to be cash, or?
So that's a great question. So I'm gonna assume the loan. Now let's say the property is worth $650 and the loan is $400. So now the difference between the loan that I'm getting from the bank and what I'm paying the seller for the property is $250,000, okay? That's a significant difference. So because of that significant difference, you have a couple of options. The first option would be you could go to a different lender and ask for a second to cover some of that. That would be one option. Another option is you could go to the original lender who's gonna let you assume the first and ask them for the second. Which would probably be more inclined to make that happen, by the way. They would probably feel more comfortable with that. The third option would be to write a check for the difference. You could have the seller carry the difference, or a portion thereof. Because the seller carrying the difference is no difference than going to Logix and getting a loan for the $250, right? The seller's acting as a bank and loaning you the $250, or some number there, right? So there's different things that you can do to make all that happen. You just gotta work with the original lender to make sure that they're comfortable and okay with all the payments that you're taking on. But it's all perfectly okay as long as, now, Carol's specific question was, when does it financially make sense? And I would say that there's no way to boilerplate that answer. That's gonna depend on the terms and the prospective buyer. If the prospective buyer has cash, if they're cash heavy, then it might make perfect sense for them to take over the loan and write a check for $250 and be in a great position, equity-wise. But if you've got a first-time home buyer that doesn't have a lot of cash and they're borrowing money from grandma for the down payment, then that probably isn't the greatest thing for them to do. In fact, it might even be better for them not to assume the loan at all and just go get a new loan at 7% and refinance it when the rates drop. Right? It's just gonna depend on the buyer and the terms. Virginia?
When assuming a loan, does the property get title insurance? Is it a regular escrow that we're running through, or you are taking all the liabilities?
Say that one more time for me.
Does, if you're assuming a loan, does the property get insured through the title insurance, or you're assuming all liabilities as you mentioned?
The title insurance, you would still receive title insurance. You would run a normal escrow and title, all of that would remain normal. Or the same, samesies. Did that answer your question on assumable loans?
Yes, to an extent. Are
To an
there
extent.
classes? Yeah, is there classes specifically, like, well, is anybody giving classes specifically on the lender, like, what's her name, Aya?
Not that I'm aware of, but I
Oh, who's
mean,
more
if
familiar?
there's a need for one, let's do it. Yeah, we can have Hadia come in and do
But
classes.
basically, all it starts with finding out what the mortgage company of the seller, right?
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
kind of.
What didn't I answer, Blanca, that
Oh.
could help?
Okay, so just like step by step. So, okay, so the loan is assumable, now what? Does the mortgage company send a package for the buyer to complete and get approved? Is that what happens?
Yeah, so what'll
Okay.
happen is you'll make a call.
Okay,
Hey Chase Bank, this is Blanca. I have my property over here on 15th and I wanna sell it. Is my loan assumable? And Chase says, let me look up the account. Yes, Blanca, it's
Okay.
assumable. okay, great, what do I have to do to make, what's my buyer gonna have to do
No.
to make that assumable? Because every bank is probably gonna be a little different in their
Yeah.
steps.
Okay, maybe they say go online or we're
Yeah,
sending
and
the
then-
package.
and- right.
That's where I got
And
it
they're
lost.
probably gonna give you some answer, well, the buyer will have to qualify,
Ah, okay.
so that is well known, right, that is gonna be a boilerplate thing. The buyer will have to qualify just as the original buyer did. There's no like automatics.
So that's where the qualification comes from the
Yeah.
current mortgage,
Yep,
like instead of the lender.
yep, so then when Carol
That's-
comes to make an offer on the property and she makes her offer contingent on taking over your loan, then now the loan contingency is Chase Bank saying yes to Carol.
Yeah, okay.
Just like it would if she was gonna go to Logix and get the loan.
Yeah, okay, so that's where I got a little lost, like where does the package come from for this buyer to qualify?
Yeah,
But
it'd
I
be
think it's
just
coming
like
from
she
the-
walked into Chase Bank and without you and said, I wanna borrow money to buy a house.
Got
They're
it.
gonna use their same exact steps that they would use, whether it was assumable or it wasn't assumable. Does that make sense?
Yes, now it does. Okay, so.
Anything else? Anything else that you wanna go over specific? What?
Christian, do you have anything that you wanna touch something, any subject that you wanna touch on?
No?
Come on, Christian.
I hope that they do that all day. That noise right there, that specific noise,
Yeah, I think when you. do
that would be great, just like all day long, every day. Wouldn't that be great? That this was. Okay, alright, so now.
It sounds like when you're at the dentist.
Yeah.
It does. Now I'm envisioning my tooth getting.
Wasn't amazing.
Yes, I know.
Alright, let's talk a little bit about the, let's talk a little bit about the open house. Visitor, non-agency disclosure, and sign-in. So we use this, Claire's not here. That's interesting, she's always here. This is used when we're gonna be doing an open house, or showing a property for an individual. So let's say that I get a call from Wendell, and Wendell says, Drew, I found this property over here on Cypress, and I wanna see it. And I say, okay, well, the deal is, Wendell, as of January 1, I'm no longer allowed to show you a property without you signing something with me. And you've got two options. Option number one, I can show you the property and represent you, and then we can have a fiduciary relationship. Or option two, you can sign a non-agency document where I'm not representing you, and I will show you the property, but I'm also working on behalf of the seller when I show that property, and I'm not really, I don't really have to answer any questions or tell you anything about the property. Now, obviously, you're gonna say it differently than I did. You're gonna say it professionally with some tact. Okay? I, of course, wouldn't. I would say it just like that, probably, but you need to say it the way you would say it, where there's professionalism and tact.
I like your way.
Well, here's the deal. You get to a point in your career, and you all will, and Blanca's probably there too, and Tiffany might be there too, where you don't really care.
Yeah.
I just want the real deal. I don't want to play, I don't want to dance. I don't want to play around with this. I want to know if you're going to be my client or not, because I'll move on to somebody who does want to be my client. Right? But not always are you in that place in your career. Right? So that you get to a point where, okay, I offended you because I told you the truth. Okay, go to somebody who's going to lie to you then. That's fine. Go for it. Off you go. I mean, just, it's all about your particular way of doing business and where you're at in your career, right? we have some new people in the room, so I want to share something that my mentor shared with me 24 years and like 5 months ago, ish. So my mentor was my mentor was two people. It was a husband and wife team, Jack and Mitzi Butler. And they owned this little petite company called Real Estate Professionals. And there was only 2 other agents in the office besides me. One was the #1 agent in the entire MLS, RonnieCorley.com. Her name is not RonnieCorley.com, her name is Ronnie Corley. She was the first one in our little town to get her own website, and the name of that website was RonnieCorley.com, so I therefore nicknamed her for the rest of our lives RonnieCorley.com. Yes, and when she got Realtor of the Year, and I said it on the microphone, I called her RonnieCorley.com. It was funny. So it was me, RonnieCorley.com, and this guy named Bob Murphy. Now, Bob Murphy is one of these guys that when he would close a deal, he would go fishing for a week.
Nice.
RonnieCorley.com had all the business in the world that she needed, and she didn't need to do uptime. She didn't need to do floor time. So she just sat in her corner and did her thing, and her client with her assistant, and she just did her business. So when it was glory day when Bob would close a deal, because I knew Bob was going fishing, and I had all the floor time the whole week. Morning, afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, all of it. I did my own fishing for clients, right? So I was brand spanking new, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and a couple walked in and said they want to sell their home in Trona. Does anybody know Trona? If you haven't heard of Trona, you're not missing anything. Trona is 25 miles east of Ridgecrest, through a little windy road where there's rock formations that people have painted and made sharks and birds, and it's kind of fun. But anyway, there's no cell reception, and there's 2 plants in Trona. And these plants put off so much sulfur in the air that you cannot grow a lawn in Trona. And the whole town smells like rotten eggs. Okay? So it's not an incredibly desirous place to live. In fact, most people who work at those, by the way, good jobs at the plants, those are great jobs. Most of them live in Ridgecrest and they commute. But some people live there, and they have some nice homes, but there's just no landscaping, and okay, it is. But the average price point, I don't know what it is today because I haven't looked in years and years and years. But at that point in time, the average price point was $35,000 was the average sales price. And so a couple came in and they want to sell their house in Trona, so I'm all excited. So I bring them in the conference room, I'm doing my listing presentation, and I'm burning a hole in the rug between Jack's desk and the conference room where I'm constantly asking questions of Jack, right? And so, by the way, Jack was, anybody ever watch that movie, Meet the Parents? Mm-hmm. You know the little baby that says, ass? Ho! That's Jack. He's a jerk. If you know him, you love him, and he's not a jerk to you, but to the outside world, he's a jerk. So he sits, and he was deaf, like half deaf, he couldn't really hear. And so, but he would always sit at his desk like this. And he had a smile on him. Because he was proud of me, but he knew that I was messing up. So he would sit there, and so the people left, and then he said to me, okay, so Drew, now I want you to get out your calculator. And I want you to do 3% times $35,000. What's the amount of commission you're going to earn?
That should have been a flop.
Okay, right. Okay, Drew. Now, how far is it to Trona from Ridgecrest? 26 miles. Okay. All right. What do you drive? And how many miles a gallon do you get? So how much fuel are you going to use every time somebody wants to see the property, put the sign, the lockbox, all the things? How much is it going to cost you to take this listing? And I said, there's no money left. By the time I pay you, I pay the office, and I pay the gas, and the sign, and the thing. I'm not making any money on the listing. And he said, that's actually not the most expensive part of taking the listing. The most expensive part of taking the listing is that that sweet couple that lives in Trona have friends. And when I do a really great job for them in selling their $35,000 home, they're going to tell their friends in Trona. Now guess what? Drew becomes the Trona king. And I end up running back and forth to Trona
For $3,000, for
For-
3%. $1,000,
maybe.
maybe.
For maybe $1,000 by the time I pay the brokerage and the E&O and the thing, right?
$500, maybe.
Maybe. I'm gonna make a little dab of money and that's gonna be my business. So he said to me, he said, I want you to remember this, because right now you're new in the business, Christian, you're new in the business. And so every listing and every piece of business sounds really great. And this was the hardest thing for me to learn, but it's worth passing on. And that is, it's so simple and it's stupid. You do the business that you do. That's what he said to me. You do the business that you do. So if you list $1 million homes, those people have friends and you're probably gonna be doing $1 million homes. And if you list in Trona, you're probably gonna have $35,000 listings. You do the business that you do. So at the time, there was the owner of Century 21 who was the Trona King. I've forgotten his name, James maybe? He's like since long time retired. And so James was, so what I did is I did a referral for those people to James. And I said, you know, I was talking to my broker about this and James is, he takes all the listings in Trona and so he's there all the time. So he's probably gonna be able to service you better than me. And they were like, oh, we appreciate you so much, thank you. And then now I never did another deal in Trona except for when one of my clients went on the auction.com and bid and put my name as the agent. And then I just got a check show up in the mail.
Oh, better than.
I didn't even have to go over there because it was auction.com. And he put my name as the broker and so I got $3,000 and I didn't even know I was the agent.
You made it up for the one that you missed.
I made up for the other one, right? So even though, what's the moral of my story? Even though you may be new in the business, let's say you're not new in the business. Let's say that you've been in business for a while, but you find yourself constantly selling a product that you would rather not sell, or you're constantly selling at a price point that is sort of keeping you down from making the real dollars that you want to make. Remember what Jack Butler said, you do the business that you do. So what would it look like and how would you come out of that to be able to increase your price point or move away from that product into a product? Nico, are you just stretching or do you have something to say?
Both. Because I struggled with that when I first started. And I figured out a way to navigate from selling the bottom of the barrel. And I did one of those. I had a Ridgecrest deal that I made $500 on, but it was to build a relationship with investors. And so I found if I'm getting these lower prices, how do I push that forward? And that was actually kind of through the avenue of investors, as well as reconnecting or figuring out where I was applying my attention to connect with new people. So spending more time in Sacramento Valley, which I grew up with, and reconnecting with those people that I grew up with and those families, as well as using that, what I had when I was being given these $180,000 homes out here, and figuring out a way, how can I maximize these $180,000 homes? And that was by building relationships with investors who are gonna buy them and then resell them for $300,000, $400,000 afterwards.
Yeah.
And so that was the big thing.
Yeah. Well, and that relationship wasn't a Ridgecrest relationship. They just happened to be purchasing a home in Ridgecrest.
Which I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for the fact that they were
Correct.
investors.
Right. So for that point,
Yes.
you did the right thing
Yeah.
because you did the business that you wanted to do. It just that particular product was more of a one-off.
Yeah.
Or maybe a two-off or whatever. Right.
And that was the first deal of now very many
Many,
now having.
right.
Yeah.
So what would it look like? And I love Elaine, thank you for sharing that with me, that she used to work in Ridgecrest and that she went to the Toronto Pinnacles. So the Pinnacles are awesome, by the way. That's a fun place to go and visit. I don't know if you knew that, what's that movie, very famous one with Mark Wahlberg, and they've got the Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes was actually filmed in Toronto at the Pinnacles. A lot of movies are actually filmed in Ridgecrest, in your current Toronto area, believe it or not. Top Gun 2, Maverick.
Did you finish saying about, did you finish?
I'm going there.
Oh.
I'm going. So the point is that you do the business that you do. So how do you get away from that is by controlling your business. So just because somebody wants to go see a property, if they are unwilling to sign a buyer-broker agreement, doesn't mean that there's blood in the water and you have to jump in and taste the blood and go, like, don't think you have to do that. You are in control of your business. So that's the purpose of where I'm going with this, is that yes, now, I used to have a rule of thumb and it was called one and done. Some agents do 3. I learned that it's 1. If I don't have the capacity to influence and coach the client to work with me on one showing, then I didn't do my job and onward. So I would show one house and get a commitment. If I didn't have a commitment or they were not pre-approved, I would show one house to give myself that opportunity to build the rapport, get them to a lender, and get the client. And my rule to myself was, if I couldn't do it in one, then I wasn't the right realtor for them. Because guess what? I did it in one. And if I didn't, here's what I found. I found that it didn't matter because the second and the third and the fourth, I still didn't get them. Because it wasn't about me, it was about them. Not being motivated and not being committed. So it's one and done. So you could use this for that purpose. You could use this document and say, I need, unfortunately, by the way, blame the government. Why not? You know, say, I'm sorry that Gavin signed this order that says I'm no longer, basically, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, your rights have been taken from you. And I'm not allowed just to show you houses anymore. I have to have you sign something. One thing is a representation agreement, another one is saying I'm not representing you. So I'll meet you there, but before I go into the property, I've got to have you sign one of these things. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
So he signs that and the buyer broker agreement?
And so then you could have him sign, let's say this is your first time and it was just a random call from a website or a sign call, or maybe they saw your ad on the trash can. Don't do that. You see these trash can ads on Rancho Vista Boulevard? Please don't do this. Anyway, so I'm gonna have, so you may have them sign this so you can show the property, and then you may use that opportunity to then talk with them and educate them and show them why they need a real estate agent, and then break out the buyer representation agreement and get them under contract. Get them back to the office for an appointment so you could do a buyer representation, a buyer presentation with them. Have a buyer presentation at the property if it's vacant.
So you
Pull up to the kitchen counter and
So you can show them the house and then have them sign the RBC.
yeah, but before you show the home, they have to sign this document.
Oh, the open house one?
Yeah, well, because it's for both. It's a non-agency, so it's for an individual private showing as well. So I think we all know when you're doing an open house, they got to sign this saying you're working on behalf of the seller. But when you're going to go show one property, you could utilize this document to help facilitate the one and done.
Yeah, to get him into contract.
to get them under contract. So the whole point would be, you're not gonna sign it to show the property. Please don't do that. If you're gonna do that, then just say, you know what, you're gonna have to call another agent if you don't want representation. Because I don't do that. I'm not a taxi driver, I'm not an Uber.
There's a liability, like document too that's kind of attached to that. Is that something that we should be getting signed to if they're walking on there, or is that just for in your listings?
That's for your listings.
Yeah. I don't know if it's attached to that, but it comes.
No,
up
it's
with-
for your listings, and basically what it's saying is, I represent the seller and not you, and so I'm here today to show you the property and answer questions, but I'm working on behalf of the seller, not you.
And it says, and it's a release of liability for your seller when people are walking through, right?
A release of liability for the seller?
Because it talks about like beware of this when you're walking through and damages and it has this whole, and it's one of the CAR documents.
Yeah, so I don't remember that part, I'll have to reread the document. Pardon me, but what I remember it being is more of a release for the agent.
Oh, it's a release.
It's a release for the agent saying that I'm not held responsible, I'm here to work for the seller. I don't even have to answer your questions, except for in a capacity that helps my seller.
Yeah, maybe I misinterpreted it.
Yeah, I believe, but, so and then open houses, of course, you're gonna use this document because again, it's the same thing. It's disclosing to them that you're not representing them, that you're representing the seller, and that they're entering the property. And now, all the days of people not having to sign in because they didn't want to, those days are gone. Now you can say, hey, it's not me, don't shoot the messenger, you gotta call Gavin's office. If you have a problem with it,
The document that he's referring to is appropriate visit and open house advisory.
let's look at it.
What was the question? What was it?
Bless you.
Thank you.
Property visit and open house advisory, is this the one, Virginia?
I believe.
Is this the one you were thinking
I think
of?
this is the one I'm thinking of, yep.
Okay, so this is,
Yeah,
okay,
you
you might,
attach it to the open house and have them sign.
you attach this, okay. So you might be recorded, because sellers might have cameras. Be careful.
Personal safety. Yeah, this is it.
Footing, okay. So this, you're right, this would be to protect the seller, right? Animals or pets, children, minors, risks of injury. This is a release of liability to the seller because these people are coming through their home.
So they have to sign before they go inside?
That is not mandatory, but it's how you should do that.
It's recommended, but it is not mandatory. The other one is mandatory.
Another
Virginia.
thing that I used to be very careful whenever I show properties to the buyers, it was asking them about being allergic. And I forgot about this, and it was brought to my attention on my last showing with my client. He was allergic to cats. The minute we walked into the house, he was like, Virginia, I'm allergic to cats, and there's cats here. And that's something that we have, and he was highly allergic.
Yeah.
He stepped out right away, of course,
Yeah.
but that's something that we need to keep in the top of our heads to ask him about allergies before.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, as the listing agent, we should say cats present.
Sure.
Cats present.
Sure. Sure. I'm allergic to smoke and cats.
Yeah.
And I walked into a house when I was showing a house. And I opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door, it hit me like a ton of bricks, the cigarette smoke. And so I stepped back and I said, I'm so sorry, you guys, I am allergic to smoke and I can't go in. And she's like, that's okay. She goes in. They love the house and they bought it. She's a smoker.
Wow.
They mirror each other. Mirror.
Yeah, right. That probably made her feel right at home. Right? Like, okay, cool. But Drew can't. So, okay. What else? Anything else you guys want to talk about today that make a good use of your time?
We have a class on investing and investors.
We are putting together a class on investing.
I just started.
In fact,
I just used the other license.
we are. We actually have an ALC this year with some different committees. We have a finance committee and an opportunities committee, and the opportunities committee actually already have met, and they've already come up with a couple of wealth building classes that they're gonna be putting on. They're gonna be putting on a trust class, a corporation class, and then we're gonna have different opportunities. I think we're gonna have a cash flow game night in the Market Center. If you don't know what that is, that's a lot of fun. So yes, that is coming soon.
So I have all these people calling me, do I have anything off market? Well, even if I did, I don't understand the investor thing.
Oh,
Don't work with any of them,
yeah.
people here.
Yeah, we have enough investors within our own community. Mark Chappell,
Yeah.
Mike Jackson, Garrett, Sam Raffay. You know, we have enough people in our.
Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. We have enough people within our own community. We don't need to work with. I get those text
And
messages,
there's
Carol.
not that many, like, you don't come across those types of homes very
You
often
don't.
anyways. So as soon as you do, talk to everybody. Or I usually go to one person at a time and present it to them.
Well, I mean, because Mark wants me to learn, and I get that, and I appreciate it. But for example, you know, he gets all these emails from Seller's Advantage. And then he's like, here, you know, take care of this. Well, our E&O doesn't cover that, because you know how some of the companies want to use their own. But I had this woman who wants to sell this beautiful house in Anna Verde. So I go talk to her,
Yeah,
you know, I'm all excited, it's gorgeous.
yeah, right,
woo.
right.
Well, the next day she met with Seller's Advantage, and she wants to go with them. And I feel horrible, not just for me, but she's.
For her.
Yeah. So she, you know, is it getting back to me? I'll call you if you need, and I tried to tell her, but she was in a big hurry, she wanted to get out, and
Can you tell us more about Seller's Advantage?
Is it like Zillow? Is it like another third-party company or what?
are they,
No events have a.
are they a wholesaler?
Open door.
Yeah, they're just gonna buy your property for pennies on the dollar, but they're gonna do it fast, and it's gonna be cash, and they'll put cash in your pocket, and off you go.
No repairs, nothing like.
They make it sound.
No brokers?
You guys have been in the business long enough, Blanca, to know what does sellers always tell you when you go on a listing appointment? What's one of the things they always tell you that they want?
Money.
They want money, but what else do they want?
Quick send.
They want a quick sale. What else do they want? Or they say, I'm not in a hurry.
No hassles.
Huh?
No hassles.
I don't want any hassles, meaning, what do they always say? Always say, I'm selling the house as is. Do they not?
Yeah.
Is that what we always hear? Always hear that. So it's very appealing to a seller's ear to think that there will be no hassle and I'll just have my money and away that I go.
Yeah, just whatever they ring in their ear.
Uh-huh. It's
Everything
called
sounded what they wanted
se-
to hear.
it's called selling the sizzle, not the steak.
Yeah.
And it can be a difficult thing to overcome. In fact, we've got some brokerages out there that are selling sizzle to real estate agents. And not the steak. And it's hard because KW actually has the steak. But it can be difficult to see that steak when all you see and smell is the sizzle, right? And so it's the same thing with this company. They're just coming in and they're advertising no commission dollars and no repairs and
No open houses,
what?
no open houses.
No open houses, which I don't want to do them anyway. But
And it's full of stuff, beautiful furniture. They said you don't have to worry, we'll take care of that too. So she
yeah.
just,
Right, because they're making a lot of money.
it's terrible. She would listen to someone she sees on TV.
Why not say I'll match the deal?
That's an idea.
Okay, what's their deal? Show me their deal, maybe I can match it.
Oh, that's it. I asked her, she said, I'd rather not say. Because I wanted to know what their offer was.
Well, what if I matched it? Or what if I went 5 over that? What would that look like?
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna lose it anyway, you may as well go for it.
Exactly. Okay, that's very good.
And then you call Mark and say, I think we might have an investment opportunity.
Well, actually, I made an offer on behalf of Mark and Carlos for around 5. It was worth $625 at least. And she said, no thanks.
Anything else? All right, I'm gonna see you guys tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning for the team meeting.
What is that?
Lunch is being served tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about our database, how to categorize and how to tag and all the things in our database tomorrow, and how to talk to people tomorrow. It's gonna be the Loving on the Database Day.
So 10 o'clock, the 201 contact?
201, 9 a.m. is orientation.
10 o'clock is 201, what is that?
9 o'clock is orientation, 10 o'clock is 201 contacts and beyond. That's where Armando and I are gonna be talking about, we're gonna be teaching, we're gonna be basically doing the same thing we're doing in the team meeting, but at a different level. So that's gonna be for people who maybe, I don't wanna say starting out in the business, because you could be in the business and don't have a database. This would be for you. Okay? And then 11 o'clock is the team meeting, where we're gonna go a little deeper on the database. And then at 5 o'clock on the east side, we're doing the love dish.
So lunch tomorrow and then the potluck.
Yep, lunch tomorrow by dawn. See you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you guys in Zoom land.
Sí, yo le repito. No puedes darlo.